Autumn wind was swirling golden leaves through the narrow streets of a small town where Lily lived. She was 10 years old and resembled a sunbeam breaking through the clouds on an overcast day. Lily had long, fair hair that she loved to braid into pigtails, and large brown eyes that always sparkled with curiosity. She adored reading adventure books, drawing fantastical worlds, and dreaming about embarking on a round-the-world trip someday. But most of all, Lily loved animals. She could spend hours watching birds in the garden, petting neighborhood dogs, and feeding stray cats that roamed the yards. Lily was an only child in the family. Her parents, Anne and Mike, loved their daughter very much, but their work consumed almost all of their time. Mom worked as a nurse at City Hospital, and Dad was an engineer at a factory outside of town. They tried to spend as much time with Lily as possible, but often returned home late, tired and exhausted. Lily understood that her parents worked for her sake, for her future, but sometimes she felt lonely. Her best friends were books, pencils, and the imaginary worlds she created in her room. One day, returning from school, Lily noticed a small cat in the alleyway. It was sitting on the edge of the sidewalk, shivering from the cold, and looking at the girl with big green eyes. The cat was skinny, with dirty gray fur, matted in places, but there was something special in its gaze, a mixture of wariness and hope. Lily stopped, crouched down, and reached out her hand. "Hi, little one," she said softly. "You're hungry, aren't you?" The cat didn't move, but it didn't run away either. Lily rummaged in her backpack and took out half a sandwich that she had left over from lunch. She broke off a piece and placed it in front of the cat. It sniffed the food at first, and then greedily snatched it and swallowed it. Lily smiled. "I'll name you Mirka," she said, watching the cat lick its whiskers. "You don't mind, do you?" Thus began their friendship. Every day after school, Lily brought Mirka something tasty, a piece of cheese, a little sausage, or leftovers from her lunch. Mirka, initially timid and cautious, gradually got used to the girl. She no longer hid when Lily appeared in the alleyway, but ran to meet her, purring and rubbing against her legs. Lily would pet her, tell her about her school affairs, about the books she was reading, and about her dreams. Mirka would listen, curled up comfortably at her feet, and it seemed that she understood everything. "You know, Mirka," Lily said one day, sitting on an old bench in the alleyway, "when I grow up, I will definitely take you home with me. We will live together, and we will have a big garden where you can run and catch butterflies. And we will also have a huge house, and it will have a fireplace, and we will sit by the fire on winter evenings." Mirka purred as if agreeing with every word. Lily didn't know that Mirka had been homeless for a long time, that she had survived harsh winters, hunger, and loneliness. But for the cat, these meetings with Lily became a bright spot in her difficult life. And for Lily, Mirka became a true friend, someone with whom she could share everything that lay on her heart. Time passed, and autumn gave way to winter. Lily continued to care for Mirka, bringing her food and even an old hat so that the cat could shelter from the cold. But in the last days of December, Lily began to notice that something was wrong with her. She got tired quickly, even if she was just walking in the yard. Sometimes she felt dizzy, and she had to sit down on a bench to catch her breath. Food that she loved so much, especially Mom's pancakes with strawberry jam, seemed tasteless, and Lily often left her plate almost untouched. "Are you getting sick, Sunshine?" Mom asked, touching her forehead. "You don't seem to have a temperature." "Everything's fine, Mom," Lily replied, trying to smile. She didn't want to worry her parents, because they were already busy enough. But deep down, she felt that something was wrong, and only Mirka, it seemed, noticed her weakness. The cat began to rub against her legs more often, as if trying to cheer her up, and lay down next to her, warming her with her warmth. Lily didn't know that her life was about to change forever, and Mirka, her little gray angel, would become for her Not just a friend, but a real salvation in the darkest days. Winter this year was especially harsh. Snow fell almost every day, covering the city with a white blanket, and frosts made passers-by wrap themselves in scarves and hide their hands in their pockets. Lily, despite the cold, continued her daily meetings with Mirka. She put on a warm jacket, Mom's mittens, and ran to the alleyway to bring food to the cat. But with each day it became more and more difficult. Her legs felt like cotton, her breath was catching, and her heart was beating so loudly that Lily could hear it even through the howling of the wind. "Everything's okay, Mirka," she said, sitting down on a bench and breathing heavily. "I'm just a little tired. There were a lot of lessons at school today, and we ran in gym class. That's all." Mirka looked at her with her big green eyes, as if understanding that it wasn't just about lessons. She climbed onto Lily's lap, purred, and rubbed her muzzle against her hand, as if trying to say, "I'm here. I'm with you." Lily stroked her, feeling how the cat's warmth warmed her freezing fingers, and her heart felt lighter. But soon it became impossible to ignore the symptoms. One morning, Lily woke up with such weakness that she could barely get out of bed. Her head was spinning, black spots flickered before her eyes, and the breakfast that Mom had lovingly placed in front of her only caused nausea. Anne, noticing her daughter's paleness, immediately put her hand to her forehead. "Lily, are you sure you're not getting sick?" she asked, frowning. "You look completely pale. Maybe you should stay home today." "No, Mom, I'm fine," Lily stubbornly replied. She didn't want to miss school, because her friends were there, art classes, and the opportunity to forget about her strange malaise. But by lunchtime, she felt so bad that the teacher sent her home, calling her parents. In the evening, Anne and Mike took Lily to the doctor. The doctor, an elderly man with kind eyes, carefully examined the girl, listened to her heart, and measured her blood pressure. He asked questions to which Lily reluctantly answered, embarrassed to talk about her weakness. Then the doctor asked her parents to stay in the office and sent Lily to the corridor. "We need to do some tests," the doctor said when Lily left. "She has symptoms that may indicate a serious illness. I don't want to scare you, but it's better to be safe than sorry." Anne squeezed Mike's hand, feeling how everything inside her went cold with fear. They nodded, agreeing to all the necessary procedures. That evening, Lily first heard a word that she did not understand, but which made her parents turn pale: leukemia. The following days passed as if in a fog. Lily was taken to the hospital for tests, blood was drawn, some complicated procedures were performed, which she tried not to think about. She didn't like the smell of the hospital, a mixture of medicines and disinfectants. She didn't like how the nurses whispered behind the door and how Mom and Dad tried to smile, although their eyes were full of anxiety. Lily didn't understand what was happening, but she felt that it was something bad. And only Mirka, her faithful friend, remained the same, warm, affectionate, and understanding. "You know, Mirka," Lily said one evening, sitting on a bench in the alleyway, "it seems to me that Mom and Dad are hiding something. They are always whispering and then pretending that everything is fine. But I'm not a little kid. I see that they are scared. You won't deceive me, will you?" Mirka purred, pressing against Lily, and the girl felt that at least here, in this cold alleyway, everything was as before. But soon, her fears were confirmed. One evening, when Lily was already in bed, she heard muffled voices of her parents behind the wall. Mom was crying, and Dad was saying something about chemotherapy and chances of recovery. Lily didn't understand everything, but one word stuck in her memory: cancer. She knew that it was a terrible disease from which people sometimes die. Her heart pounded, and Lily hid her head under the blanket to drown out the sounds and her own thoughts. The next day, her parents sat down next to her on the sofa and told her the truth. They tried to speak softly, choosing words so as not to scare her, but the truth was still heavy as a stone. "You have a blood disease, Sunshine," Mom said, squeezing Lily's hand. "But we will fight, and the doctors will do everything to make you better. Just don't be afraid, okay? We will always be there." Lily nodded, but everything inside her constricted with fear. She didn't want to be sick, didn't want to lie in the hospital, didn't want her life to change. But most of all, she was afraid that she would no longer be able to see Mirka. Hospital weekdays began quickly. Lily was placed in the hematology department in a small ward with white walls and a narrow bed. She was given IV drips, medications that made her nauseous, and endless examinations. Her hair, which she was so proud of, began to fall out, first in a few strands, and then in whole clumps. Lily looked at herself in the mirror and did not recognize her reflection. Pale face, dark circles under her eyes, bald head. She felt like a stranger in her own body. Her parents were there every day, but their presence could not drive away the loneliness that enveloped Lily at night. She missed home, her books, walks in the park. But most of all, she missed Mirka. Lily often imagined her friend sitting in the alleyway, waiting for her, but not waiting. From these thoughts, tears flowed down her cheeks, and Lily buried her face in the pillow so that no one would hear her cry. But one night, a miracle happened. Lily was lying in her ward, looking at the ceiling, when she heard a quiet rustle at the window. She turned her head and saw a familiar gray figure squeezing through the gap between the frames. It was Mirka. Somehow the cat found her, made her way through the hospital courtyard, climbed onto the second-floor windowsill, and was now sitting by the window, looking at Lily with her green eyes. "Mirka," Lily whispered, afraid that it was a dream. She carefully got out of bed, trying not to disturb the IV drip, and opened the window. Mirka immediately jumped inside, purring so loudly that Lily involuntarily smiled. "How did you find me?" she whispered, hugging the cat. "You're my magic cat, aren't you?" Mirka curled up in a ball on her lap, and for the first time in a long time, Lily felt warmth and peace. She knew that many more difficulties lay ahead, but now she had a friend who would not leave her, even within the hospital walls. Mirka became her ray of sunshine in this dark world, and Lily promised herself that she would do everything to recover, for herself, for her parents, and for her little friend. Days in the hospital dragged on endlessly, merging into one gray stripe. Lily no longer counted how many times she had been given IV drips, how many injections she had received, how many nights she had spent looking at the ceiling and listening to the medicine dripping in the tube. Her body was weakening, but her spirit remained strong, and Mirka was to thank for this. The cat came almost every night, miraculously finding her way into the hospital building. She made her way through the yard, climbed the fire escape, and squeezed into the window gap to lie next to Lily. The nurses, noticing the cat, initially tried to drive her away, but Lily begged so much to leave her that in the end, the staff relented. "If it helps the girl, let it be," said the head nurse, looking at Lily's pale face. Mirka became for Lily not just a friend, but a real talisman. The girl believed that the cat brought her luck, that her purring drove away the pain, and the warmth of her body gave her the strength to fight. Lily talked to Mirka, told her about her fears, about how afraid she was of not waking up after another injection, about how she wanted to run in the park again, read books, and draw. Mirka listened, purred, and rubbed her muzzle against her hand, as if saying, "I'm here, I'm with you, don't give up." But the disease did not recede. Doctors, despite all efforts, could not achieve improvement. Chemotherapy helped only slow down the process, but not stop it. One day, when Lily was lying after another course, the chief physician, Dr. Ivanov, came to her ward. His face was serious, but hope flickered in his eyes. "Lily," he began, sitting down next to her bed, "we are doing everything possible to make you better. But your illness, it's very serious. We need to do a bone marrow transplant. It's a complex operation, but it can save your life." Lily looked at him, trying to understand what this meant. She was scared, but she didn't want to show her fear. She nodded, squeezing Mirka's paw, who was lying on her lap. "And what will happen if the operation is not done?" she asked quietly. The doctor hesitated, but decided to be honest. He knew that Lily was a smart girl and deserved the truth. "Without surgery, the chances will be very slim," he said softly. "But we will do everything to find a donor and perform it successfully. You just believe, okay?" Lily nodded, but everything inside her constricted with horror. She didn't want to die. She was only 10 years old, and she had so many plans, so many dreams. She wanted to see the sea, learn to ride a bike, write her own book, and of course, she wanted to take Mirka home so that they could live together, as she had promised. That evening, when her parents came to visit her, Lily spoke to them for the first time about her fears. She waited until the nurse left the ward and said quietly, "Mom, Dad, I know I might die. I heard the doctors talking about it. I don't want you to think that I don't understand anything, but I'm very scared." Anne could not hold back her tears. She hugged Lily, pressing her so tightly that the girl felt her mother's shoulders tremble. "Sunshine, we won't let this happen," she said, trying to speak firmly, although her voice trembled. "We will find a donor, and you will get better. You have to believe, okay? We all believe in you." Mike was silent, but his eyes were full of pain. He took Lily's hand and squeezed it, as if trying to convey his strength to her. "You are our girl," he finally said, "and we will do everything to keep you with us. You just hang in there, okay?" Lily nodded, but fear settled in her heart, which did not let go day or night. She was afraid not only for herself, but also for Mirka. The cat, who had been her support all this time, began to weaken. Lily noticed that Mirka had become even thinner than before. Her fur had lost its shine, and her movements had become slow and Vyalamy. She still came every night, but no longer jumped onto the windowsill with her former ease, but climbed with difficulty, breathing heavily. "Mirka, are you sick too?" Lily asked, stroking her. "You have to eat, you hear? I don't want anything to happen to you. I need you." Mirka purred, but her purring was weak, barely audible. Lily felt that the cat was giving her her last strength, and it tore her heart apart. She understood that Mirka, like herself, was fighting for life, but she didn't know how to help her. Meanwhile, Lily's parents were doing everything possible to find a donor. They contacted bone marrow banks, placed advertisements, asked for help from friends and acquaintances. Every day, Anne called various clinics, and Mike drove to neighboring cities to meet with doctors and find out about possible options. But time passed, and a suitable donor was still not found. Lily's condition was deteriorating, and doctors began to say that they could no longer wait. "If we don't perform the operation in the coming weeks," said Dr. Ivanov at one of the consultations, "there may be no chance left. We have to take a risk, even if the donor is not perfectly compatible." These words were a real blow to Anne and Mike. They understood that the operation was their last hope, but also knew that it might not work. They didn't want to think about the worst, but fear still penetrated their hearts, poisoning every day. Lily, despite her weakness, tried to hold on. She drew in her ward. The nurses brought her pencils and paper to distract her from gloomy thoughts. She drew Mirka, herself, the sea that she so wanted to see, and a house with a garden where they could live together with the cat. She showed each drawing to Mirka, and she, as if understanding, rubbed her muzzle against the paper. One night, when Mirka was lying on her lap, Lily felt that she could no longer keep her fears to herself. She hugged the cat and whispered, "Mirka, if I don't survive, promise that you will live for both of us, okay? You have to be strong, and if I survive, I will take you home, and we will be happy, I promise." Mirka purred, but her purring was so weak that Lily burst into tears. She felt that the cat was sacrificing herself for her, and it was unbearable. And then finally, the day came that everyone had been waiting for with trepidation and fear. In the morning, Anne entered the ward. Her face was pale, but her eyes shone with hope. "Lily, sunshine," she said, sitting down next to the bed. "We found a donor. The operation is tomorrow. Everything will be fine, I promise." Lily looked at her mother, trying to believe her words. She wanted to believe, but fear was stronger. She knew that the operation was her last chance, but also understood that she might not wake up after it. That night, Mirka came for the last time. She barely climbed onto the windowsill. Her paws were trembling and her breathing was heavy. Lily helped her down onto the bed and hugged her, feeling the cat's heart beating weakly but persistently. "Mirka," Lily whispered, "tomorrow everything will be decided. If I survive, I will take you home. We will be together, as I promised. And if not, please live for me. You are my angel, my magic cat." Mirka purred, pressing against Lily, and the girl felt how the cat's warmth gave her strength. She closed her eyes, hugging her friend, and for the first time in a long time fell asleep peacefully, without nightmares and fears. Tomorrow, everything was to be decided. The morning before the operation was cold and gray. Weak light broke through the slits in the hospital curtains, painting the ward in dull tones. Lily lay in her bed, looking at the ceiling, and tried to gather all her strength, not to succumb to fear. Her heart was beating unevenly, and thoughts swirled in her head about what would happen next. She knew that the operation was her chance, but also understood that everything might not end as she had dreamed. The only thing that gave her courage was the thought of Mirka. Lily believed that her little friend, her magic cat, would be with her, even if not physically, then in her heart. Nurses entered the ward to prepare Lily for surgery. They spoke softly, trying to cheer her up, but Lily barely listened. Her gaze was fixed on the window, where Mirka had sat last night. The cat had left before dawn, quietly and imperceptibly, as always, but Lily felt that something was wrong. Mirka looked too weak, too emaciated, and this worried Lily. "Mom," Lily said, when Anne entered the ward to say goodbye before the operation, "please find Mirka. She was here last night, but she looked bad. I'm afraid something happened to her." Anne nodded, squeezing her daughter's hand. Her eyes were red from tears, but she tried to smile. "Of course, sunshine," she said. "I'll find her, I promise. You just think about good things, okay? We will all be waiting for you. You are strong. You will manage." Lily nodded, but her heart constricted with anxiety. She closed her eyes, imagining Mirka, her green eyes, her warm fur, her purring. "Please be okay," she mentally pleaded. "I'll come back for you." The operation lasted several hours. For Anne and Mike, this time was the hardest in their lives. They sat in the hospital corridor, holding hands, and prayed that everything would go well. Every sound of footsteps, every creak of the door, made them flinch. Finally, Dr. Ivanov came out of the operating room. His face was tired, but a faint smile played on his lips. "The operation was successful," he said. "Lily is now in intensive care, but her condition is stable. Now everything depends on how her body accepts the new bone marrow, but we have every chance of recovery." Anne burst into tears, hugging Mike, and he just nodded silently, unable to utter a word. They knew that there was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long time, they had hope. Lily regained consciousness after a few hours. Her body ached, her head was heavy, but she was alive. The first thing she saw when she opened her eyes was her mother's face leaning over her. Anne was smiling, although her eyes were full of tears. "You did it, sunshine," she whispered, stroking Lily's hand. "You managed." Lily smiled weakly, but her thoughts immediately returned to Mirka. She wanted to ask if they had found the cat, but she only had enough strength to whisper, "Mirka, Where is she? Anne hesitated, but quickly said, "We'll find her, honey. You just get better, okay? Everything will be all right." But Lily felt that something was wrong. Several days passed before she was transferred from intensive care to a regular ward. She was still weak, but with each day she felt better. Her hair began to grow back, although so far it was only thin, downy hair, and her appetite gradually returned. But the joy of recovery was overshadowed by anxiety for Mirka. The cat did not appear, and Lily could not find peace. "Mom, you promised to find her," she said one day when Anne brought her favorite strawberry jam. "Please, I need to know what happened to her." Anne sighed, realizing that she could no longer postpone it. She knew the truth, but was afraid to tell her daughter, afraid that it would break her. But Lily was stubborn, and her eyes, full of determination, left no choice. "Okay, Sunshine," Anne said. "We'll look for her together as soon as you get a little stronger." A week later, when Lily could already get up and walk around the ward, she insisted on going out into the hospital yard. Her legs were trembling, she had to hold on to her mother's hand, but she was determined to find Mirka. They walked around the hospital garden, looked under benches, in bushes, in secluded corners where a cat could hide. Lily called her voice trembling with weakness, but she did not give up. And then finally, in a far corner of the garden, under an old oak tree, they found her. Mirka lay on the ground, curled up in a ball, as if asleep. Her gray fur was covered with frost, and her green eyes were closed forever. Lily froze, unable to believe what she was seeing. She knelt down, reached out her hand, and touched the cat's cold body. "Mirka," she whispered, and her voice broke. "No, please, no." Tears streamed from her eyes, hot and bitter. She hugged Mirka, pressing her to herself, as if hoping that the warmth of her body could bring the cat back to life. But Mirka was cold, motionless, and Lily realized that her friend was gone forever. Anne knelt down next to her, hugging her daughter. Her heart was breaking with pain, but she knew that she had to be strong for Lily's sake. "She gave everything to support you, Sunshine," she said quietly. "She was with you until the end because she loved you. You have to live, Lily, for her sake. She would have wanted that." Lily sobbed, burying her face in her mother's shoulder, but in the depths of her soul, a new determination was born. She understood that Mirka had sacrificed herself for her, that her little friend had given all her strength so that Lily could live. And now Lily knew that she had no right to give up. She had to recover, had to live a full life to justify this sacrifice. They buried Mirka in the hospital garden under the very oak tree where they found her. Lily asked permission to plant flowers there, and the nurses helped her. She chose white daisies, simple, but as pure and bright as the soul of her friend. Every day, while Lily remained in the hospital, she came to the grave to talk to Mirka, to tell her about her successes, about how she was learning to walk again, to rejoice in life again. "I will do it, Mirka," she whispered, looking at the flowers. "I will live for both of us. I promise." 5 years have passed. Lily stood by the window of her room, looking at the garden where white daisies bloomed, the very ones she had planted in the hospital garden in memory of Mirka, and then transplanted home when she was discharged. Now she was 15, and she was completely unlike that fragile girl who had fought for life in a hospital ward. Her hair had grown back, again long and fair as before, although she now preferred to wear it loose, not in pigtails. In her brown eyes, there was no longer fear, only a warm light and determination. Lily had fully recovered. Doctors called her case a miracle, but she knew that it was not only a miracle of medicine, but also a miracle of love. The love of her parents, the love of her little friend who sacrificed herself for her. The memory of Mirka lived in her heart, inspiring her for each new day. Lily kept all the drawings she had made in the hospital, especially those depicting a gray cat with green eyes. She even wrote a story about Mirka, which took first place in a school literary competition. This story became for her a way to tell the world how much friendship can mean, even if it doesn't last long. Lily decided that she would dedicate her life to helping animals. She dreamed of becoming a veterinarian to save those who, like Mirka, found themselves in trouble. She had already begun to help at the local animal shelter, caring for stray cats and dogs, finding them new owners. Each rescued animal reminded her of Mirka, and she felt that in this way she was paying tribute to her friend. One day, returning from the shelter, Lily noticed a small kitten in the alleyway. It was gray, with green eyes, just like Mirka, only very tiny and weak. The kitten was shivering from the cold, and Lily, without hesitation, wrapped it in her scarf and brought it home. "I'll name you Mirka," she said, looking into its big, hopeful eyes. "And I promise you will never be alone." Mirka Jr. became her faithful companion, her reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is room for light. Lily knew that her first Mirka, her magic cat, was watching her from heaven and rejoicing that her sacrifice was not in vain. And every time, looking at the blooming daisies, Lily whispered, "Thank you, Mirka. I am living for both of us, and I will always remember you."